Prime Minister Justin Trudeau facing questions this morning about his political future as he meets with his cabinet in Halifax.
These are things that actually meet the needs of the challenges Canadians are facing right now. And that's what we're focused on delivering right now and into the coming years.
The annual end-of-summer gathering is taking place against the backdrop of slumping Liberal polling numbers and a stinging by-election defeat in a former Toronto Liberal stronghold. To kick off the gathering, Trudeau announced that his government is imposing a 100% tariff on the import of Chinese-made electric vehicles and a 25% tariff on aluminum and steel from China.
Actors like China have chosen to give themselves an unfair advantage in the global marketplace, compromising the security of our critical industries and displacing dedicated Canadian autos and metal workers. So we're taking action to address that.
All right, let's turn to CTV's chief political correspondent, Vassy Kapelas. She joins me now from the retreat in Halifax. Good morning to you, Vassy. So the Prime Minister spoke to reporters early this morning before sitting down with his cabinet. Before we get to the announcement on the tariffs, can you tell us more about what we heard from Justin Trudeau today?
Well, what we heard is basically the complete opposite of what happened a year ago in Prince Edward Island at that summer cabinet retreat, where the chief criticism of the Liberals and cabinet in particular was that they didn't make any substantive announcements. That was the beginning of the end, basically, when it came to public opinion polling for the Liberals, who have been persistently behind the Conservatives since then. It appears they took heed of a lot of that criticism because they came out, and the Prime Minister specifically came out this morning with a series of very substantial comments, including the announcement that you outlined on Chinese, the import of Chinese electric vehicles, as well as aluminum and steel. But the big headline for me is his comments on immigration. There are changes that they're going to make to the temporary foreign worker program, but he didn't stop there. He did not rule out substantive changes to permanent resident rates, which were set a number of years ago. Last fall, they introduced a 5-year immigration plan, a new immigration plan. He says another one is coming this fall. The fact that the government is looking at changes to the permanent immigration stream in Canada is a hugely significant thing, not for him to rule out. And I think sets the stage for some big changes to come in the fall. Also speaks to the issues, the vulnerabilities they face politically on issues like immigration, on issues like the economy. It's like they're undoing a lot of what they did over the past few years, while simultaneously trying to convince Canadians they need to stick around after the next election to get stuff done.
Now, what about these tariffs then on Chinese EVs? Did we see this coming, and what was the Prime Minister's justification?
We did see this coming, very much so. The finance minister announced in July, following the imposition of such tariffs by the U.S. and Europe, that they would review the possibility of acting in concert here in Canada. It's not unexpected at all that they decided to do what they did. There are some potential implications. First, what is China going to do? Are they going to retaliate? They are known to do so clearly. And if they do retaliate, against which sectors or in what way will they? The second consequence is around the targets that the federal government has set for converting basically all sales of vehicles to electric vehicles. They've set targets out a couple of years, 10 years out, 2035. Ultimately, they'll all be gone. All sales are supposed to be electric vehicles by then. To what degree might this, the industry tells us it will, but to what degree will this compromise the ability to meet those targets? Because what you're saying is you're making the cheaper electric vehicles, which understandably China is subsidized. Not understandably, they shouldn't be, but they are. They're subsidizing their vehicles, so they become cheaper here. So you make it harder for Canadians essentially to buy electric vehicles because they're more expensive. But you're fighting back against unfair trade practices by China. What does it do to those targets? Does it mean that the targets have to be pushed out? I remember asking the environment minister that after the decision was made to review these tariffs, the possibility of imposing them came about. He said it would not change them. The industry thinks very differently, so that's something to watch as well.
Okay, and last question then for you, Vassy, and you sort of hinted at this. In terms of what's at stake here for the Liberals, we were expecting that there would be a cabinet shuffle a couple of months ago. That hasn't happened. Of course, Seamus O'Regan has stepped aside, but really he is with his people today, the Prime Minister. Did he talk today about his polling numbers and the support for the Liberals right now among Canadians?
Well, he essentially implied to questions about that the Canadians are not concerned about politics or polling numbers, that they're focused on basically what the government can do for them. I think two things can be true at the same time. Certainly, Canadians are concerned about their own economic plight, the situation in this country, and what the government is or isn't doing for them. But I think there is also a big conversation happening, particularly since the by-election, Marcia, that you point out, since that result about 6 weeks ago in Toronto, particularly since Joe Biden stepped aside and we have seen the sort of enthusiasm for his replacement and the uptick in public opinion polling for the Democrats as a result. He was the prime minister on the receiving end of a number of questions, for example, about, well, what do you take from that? Kind of should if you were to step aside, would it inject life into your party? He insisted that the situation in the United States is different than here. He continues to insist that he is sticking around. No big cabinet shuffle ahead of this cabinet retreat. No real substantive, change communicated out of that by-election loss, despite the fact there were Liberals caucus members asking for it. Now, the fall may hold something different, but the message that I would glean from what I've heard today and yesterday here is they believe if they keep on keeping on, if they continue putting things on the table for Canadians, that the tide will eventually turn. Whether that's the case remains to be seen.
Vashi, thanks for all that. Good to see you this morning. Vashi Capello starting us off from Halifax.